The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight on The Agenda.
Ransomware attackers are looking for maximum leverage. They care only about money and the disruption of these important organizations.
Then, later tonight.
There's nothing to curb this problem. We have more roadside zoos than any other jurisdiction in Canada, so it's a massive animal welfare problem and public safety problem.
Who launches a cyber attack on a children's hospital? Late last year, sick kids faced just such a hit, and it was by no means alone. Another recent incident targeted the LCBO, presumably in search of users' financial data. Such incursions cost companies millions and strike fear in the hearts of anyone whose information may be compromised. Can cyber security keep up? Let's ask. Tracy Dallaire, she's Director of Information Security at McMaster University. Neil Desai, Vice President at Magnet Forensics and Senior Fellow at CG, the Center for International Governance Innovation. And Charles Finley, Founding Executive Director of the Rogers Cyber Secure Catalyst at TMU, Toronto Metropolitan University. Great to have you three at our table for a very timely and important conversation. Charles, to you first. Who the hell launches a cyber attack on a kid's hospital, honestly?
Well, this is part of the new normal. And in fact, it's exactly children's hospitals and other critical infrastructure that are more and more becoming the target of cybersecurity attacks. We've seen attacks on hospitals, we've seen attacks on the energy infrastructure, transportation, communication, education sector at all levels. So ransomware attackers, which is what happened with Lockbit attacking the Sick Kids Hospital, ransomware attackers are looking for maximum leverage. They care only about money and the disruption of these important organizations. So attacking a children's hospital is, to them, without any scruples and acting obviously in a criminal manner, is exactly what they think is going to generate the leverage to get a maximum ransomware return.
That's what I was going to ask, Trey. Is there no shame anymore? Like, even criminals have a code.
Well, they're cyber criminals. They want to make money. So they're looking for opportunities to make money and create the maximum amount of incentive for the organization to pay the money so they can get back to business. And so, they are entrepreneurs and they are business people trying to make money, and they'll go after anything.
Can you tell us how this works? If you wanted to attack a hospital, how do you do it?
Sure. Well, I think one fundamental difference from today's fraudster, the cyber criminal, and yesterday's, which plays into the question you're asking, is they don't live in our community, right? They don't have to look anyone in the eye and say, hey, I'm attacking an institution that keeps children healthy or tries to bring them back to health. What's happening here is most of these attacks are emanating from abroad, often in countries that don't have extradition treaties or any sort of normalized relations with countries in the West, like Canada, the United States, the UK. So, I think people assume to be a cyber criminal today, you have to be a technical savant. And the reality is you and I can go on the internet right now and find very simple attacks and play a volume game to see who will fall for my trap, for my phishing scheme, for my ransomware. And the challenge here is the most vulnerable in society, that small and medium enterprise, senior citizens, immigrants, and institutions like hospitals and education and institutions who don't have expensive cybersecurity solutions today are the ones falling victim. These attacks are on all of us. Those who are falling victim are those who are the most vulnerable in our society.
But Tracy, it feels different now. I understand going after vulnerable senior citizens who are not sophisticated perhaps in these ways. That's been happening for a long time. Going after energy installations, nuclear power plants, is this different now? It feels like it.
It is different, and I think part of that comes from our society and the world is different. So the way we operate, everything's interconnected. Everything's using technology to run our systems. So our world's different, and what threat actors are doing then, or cyber criminals are doing, is different, and we're feeling and seeing that difference. And I really look at, we have a very interconnected ecosystem of what people do, the technology we use, and our processes. And so our approaches have to really tackle all different fronts, not just the technology, but how we behave and act in our world today.
How vulnerable do you think our major institutions are right now?
I think they're very vulnerable. I think they're vulnerable because investments, need to be made. There's been good investments. There's been good movement by governments at all levels. There's been good movement by public and private sector organizations, but much more clearly needs to be done. The international cybersecurity threat environment is extremely serious. Building on Neil's point, the fact is that these ransomware attackers are attacking from jurisdictions like Russia, like Iran, like North Korea. And Canadian institutions like Sick Kids Hospital are at the front lines of an international global cyber conflict that is happening. And we have to look at it that way. And we have to invest meaningfully and purposefully with that broader view in mind.
Are we at war, Charles?
War is a complicated,
but it's cyber war.
Word. It certainly is. Listen, it is certainly a very dangerous dynamic that puts our most vulnerable populations at risk, and we need to take a focused, all of economy, all of society approach to this extremely challenging dynamic.
Going to pick up on that in a second. First of all, we've got a 2021 cyber threat bulletin from the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, and here's what they found. In the first half of 2021, global ransomware attacks increased by 151% when compared with the first half of 2020. In Canada, the estimated average cost of a data breach, a compromise that includes but is not limited to ransomware, is 6.35 million Canadian dollars. The Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity has knowledge of 235 ransomware incidents against Canadian victims from the 1st of January to the 16th of November 2021. More than half of these victims were critical infrastructure providers. It's important to note, however, that most ransomware events remain unreported. How come, Neil?
I think there's a number of reasons why organizations, individuals aren't reporting. In the enterprise space, there's a reputational risk piece. There are insurance considerations. We're seeing the largest insurance providers now challenging claims, some getting out of the business wholly. I think there is, at the individual level, we're seeing seniors not wanting to lose their independence from their family, and being taken for a fraud often puts fear into them. There's a number of reasons, but I think the most important thing that you highlight in that bulletin is the unreported side. We think we have a handle on this issue, and not just for concerted efforts not to report. I think there's so many more that just are unknown. The amount of things I look at in my inbox every morning that I just kind of dismiss as phishing. If someone was knocking on my door to commit a similar type of fraud, my likelihood to call my local police is much higher than it is for all those phishing schemes. We do not have a true societal understanding of the magnitude of this challenge.
We don't. Why don't we?
I think partially because of the nature of the threat actor. This is a voluminous game. The technologies we're using in everyday business that you use here at TVO to automate a lot of things, the cybercriminal also has access to. And we end up in things like critical infrastructure because there's harm more than just money. If I can put a young child's health at risk, if I can take people off the energy grid for multiple days, these are things we've actually seen. The propensity to pay by management goes up. And that's why the number on those ransomware payments goes up. Cybercriminals, it was mentioned earlier, are business people. They're unscrupulous business people, but they are business people, and they will go where the rewards are, especially when the risks are low. So they are coming to things like critical infrastructure because there's harm that can be seen beyond just money.
You're at McMaster University.
Yes, I am.
Do you know if you've been hit?
When we get lots of attempts that come to any organization, and we have tools that watch these kind of attempts, sort of the knocking at the door that we talk about, through people sending straight emails, trying to get students, staff, or faculty to click on things. And we, with the investment of some resources, have been successful to catch that early and prevent and mitigate that. But what I will say is all organizations are having attempts at them daily, multiple times a day, sometimes multiple times a minute. And it's being able to catch it early, prevent it early, and then if there is something, being able to get back running again really quickly.
So let's assume Mac's been hit. You're at Toronto Metropolitan University. We assume you've been the target of various attacks as well. How do you stay ahead of it?
Well, you invest. You invest in people, process, and technology really are the key dynamics to keeping our society and our economy safe. And And we need to start with people. I mean, this is a question and a challenge about training people to meet the labor market shortage in cybersecurity. In the midst of all of these attacks that we're seeing and everything that you're talking about in terms of this growth in cybersecurity attacks, the growth in ransomware attacks, we are significantly understaffed in this country in terms of the number of cybersecurity professionals that we have in security operations centers working these problems. So we need to have a personnel solution. We need to flood the zone with thousands more trained cybersecurity professionals. We need to do that right now. That's a key solution.
Okay, I'm going to say something here that's going to get me in trouble in the building, but I'm going to say it anyway, because somebody mentioned here we need an all-hands-on-deck approach. And I think just in the last couple of weeks here at TVO, when we get emails from outside, at the very top of every email, there is a banner that now says, this is an email from outside the organization. Please be careful when you, okay? And it's only been 2 weeks since those things started showing up on our emails. We were talking about this the other day when we had a meeting. People aren't really paying attention to it anymore because they see it all the time now. And it may, sorry guys in the building, it may have a perverse effect of actually having us, tune it out because we just see it all the time. Question, is that the helpful approach to getting a handle on this problem?
Yeah, I think it's one tool. I think education, let's call it education, is one tool. Cybersecurity used to be the purview of like the 3 propeller heads in the back. Today it's the purview of everyone, right from the entry-level intern through to Steve Paikin at TVO. Actually executives tend to be, great targets because they're busy people, they click.
I'm not an executive, just for the record.
Sure, the well-paid on-air staff.
Okay, that I am. Okay, yeah.
So I think, the education piece Charles is making is important across the organization, and it has to be done in a manner that's engaging. It can't just be one more task that I have to get through every day. That being said, I also think we have to be going deep. So going wide, but also going deep. And I mean that both within organizations, but in society as well. Earlier we talked about whether cyber today is war. I actually describe it as a Hobbesian state of nature. The social contract online is totally different than our societal contract. If someone steals $2,000 from my mother's home, police investigate it. But today, it really takes something like a $2 million threat to a bank in Canada that gets people moving because we have to triage in our public safety organizations. And I understand the why. But that is rewriting the social contract. So one place I think we really need to be spending time on the education, training, is in our police agencies. And I don't just mean the big national ones. I'm talking about small, local, provincial. This is an all hands on deck situation.
Right. Sheldon, bottom of page 2, let's do the threat assessment here. The Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity released a national cyber threat assessment. This is a report for the years 2023 and 24. And it summarized 5 key judgments. Here we go. Ransomware, they say, is a persistent threat to Canadian organizations. Critical infrastructure is increasingly at risk from cyber threats. State-sponsored cyber threat activity is affecting Canadians. Cyber threat actors are attempting to influence Canadians that could degrade trust in online spaces. And finally, disruptive technologies bring new opportunities and new threats, to be sure. Let's talk... Charles, let's talk about state-sponsored cyber threat activity. State-sponsored, so I think we tend to think of this as a bunch of kids in their basement just out of control. You're saying governments are doing this around the world now?
Yes, and your point is a very good one. We need to stop thinking about cybersecurity attacks, in particular ransomware attacks, as a teenager in their parents' basement, spending their free time causing mischief. It is not that. It is a multi-billion-dollar global industry, operates with supply chains, operates with vendors, operates with sophisticated technology, research and development, highly innovative, and it operates with the tacit approval of sovereign governments that not only endure ransomware attackers operating from their jurisdictions, but want them to operate from their jurisdictions. The Russian government has been very clear that they actually endorse the activities of a number of the ransomware attackers that are operating from their jurisdiction. So that's the fundamental dynamic.
Okay, you mentioned Russia and Iran before. We don't do this, do we? Does the Canadian government sanction this stuff?
I don't believe it does. I don't believe that the Canadian government certainly doesn't sanction ransomware attackers operating from Canadian territory. And most of them don't. I mean, as we've discussed already, the fundamental dynamic here is that these are ransomware attackers that are launching their attacks from foreign jurisdictions where our laws do not apply, and the opportunities to extend our laws to those individuals are not available. We are not going to be able to extradite cybersecurity ransomware attackers from Russia, from Iran, from North Korea. So they're operating with impunity.
Gotcha. Tracy, the Internet of Things. Maybe we just take 30 seconds and explain what that is and how complicated it thus becomes as a part of this discussion.
So Internet of Things are devices that we all have around, for instance, in our homes. You may have a thermostat, and when you put your thermostat in, you connected it to the internet, you put in some kind of a code. That is an Internet of Things device. Or your new dryer that you put into your house. In organizations, we have devices that run heating and cooling in buildings, alarm systems. They're all connected to the internet in some way. And it becomes really, really critical then that we are undertaking good practices to understand how to prevent that Internet of Things device from becoming a toehold for the cyber criminals. And
because they can hack into this.
Yeah, they're everywhere in all facets of our life. Gaming systems that young kids run, the types of devices that they have. So when people install them and put them in place and they're connected in their homes and in their workplaces, it's really important to have them segmented off of, in a special place in the network. You've got to put layers of controls in place so that they don't become a toehold. It's not often the thing that we think cyber criminals are after. It's the toehold that they're looking to get in.
Because once they've got the toehold, what?
Then they can move around into an environment, whether it's in your home or in your business, and they're looking for what's of value, what to carry out, whatever kind of exploit and whatever motivation they have. And as cyber professionals, we're trying to think about, well, what are they trying to do? How do we put layers to prevent them from getting in? And it's not just technology, it's people's behaviors as well. So you may get emails or those emails with the banners, and it's reminding you to look at that email, and if there's a link in there and you weren't expecting it, to not click on it. So we can invest so much we want in technology, we also need to invest in security culture building throughout society for vulnerable people in our businesses, so that it becomes a part of our life. It's like we're driving cars, we educate young people on how to drive. When I was driving in on the 407, I saw a sign reminding me to not look at my phone when I'm driving. That's education, that's culture building. We need to do the same in this world that we live in that's super interconnected, and understand that if you're going to bring in a device in your home, like a doorbell that's smart with a camera, that's an IoT device. That's
Internet of Things.
An Internet of Things device. That's a hook to potentially get in. And there's great advice on the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity Get Cyber Safe site that's meant for all citizens to get at, to help you go in and understand what you can do to make it safe.
I wonder, Neil, if you're seeing any evidence of a pushback against this. Our lives have become increasingly technologically complicated. Do you see evidence of people saying, you know what, I'm just not going to get a credit card, or I'm not going to get that fancy kind of television set that hooks me up to the rest of the world in lots of trouble? Seeing any evidence of that?
Yeah, the greatest pushback I see is post-incident, right? So, I mean, growing up, if your house was hit by a burglar, you then did the natural thing and got an alarm system, right? And I think that's what we're seeing here. The challenges in some of these crimes, and we always, and I'm not picking on the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, but cybersecurity is always talked about in a global context or a national context in dollars and cents. One of the most prolific forms of cybercrime today, by statistics, is child sexual exploitation online. That carries lifelong implications. The interesting thing I find is parents of children of Silicon Valley executives often aren't allowed to use the consumer-facing technologies. So a lot of the things we talked about in the IoT world have a lot of standards against them, security standards and other ones. Driverless car will go through rigorous testing. But Charles and I can create technology in our basement today that targets children at 6 years old and uses behavioral psychology to keep them on that platform for hours, which is a great tool if you're a child exploiter. And there is no standards. I'll just give an analog kind of parallel. I happen to serve on the board of the YMCA in Canada, and we had to change our playgrounds every 10 years, even though they were perfectly safe. There was a standard there that says, hey, we want to preempt children hurting themselves, and we're going to make sure these things are safe. And we change that at an extreme cost to a charity. But we can start a social network tomorrow with zero standards that focuses on capturing the minds of children.
So preemptively getting out ahead of this is the way to go.
I would say that building out, we're now beyond the Web 1.0. People talk about we're in the Web 3 phase. And I think safety for the most vulnerable, and I'm not one calling for overburdensome red tape here, but we need some minimum expectations of standards. A lot of these technologies that are created targeting children, the data sits in foreign jurisdictions. So even when we know something has happened and we try to investigate as a society through our police, there's lengthy treaty-based processes to get critical evidence to investigate. This is not just a technical problem. This is a governance problem. It's an international problem. We have to start treating it more than just a ones and zeros challenge. These are real human lives that are being compromised.
Charles, do you see evidence yet of a pushback by people who think, okay, we've gone too far, my life is too dependent on technology, I'm too vulnerable, I'm dialing it back?
No, I don't. I see a full adoption of a very broad and wide array of technologies that are increasingly connected to the internet, that gather increasingly sophisticated kinds of data about their subjects, and that use that data potentially for the benefit of the individual that's wearing the device, but also for other parties. And we're just, in my view, at the beginning of this. We're going to see more devices that are more and more intrusive, particularly, in my view, in the medical field and other kinds of wearables and other devices that are really going to cross what we think of the line of human autonomy and start to engage our most personal beings. And so this is a major, major challenge. So no, I don't see a pushback to it. In fact, I see an increasing embrace.
In which case, we need to do what in order to deal with the fact that this is not going to be less a part of our lives going forward. It's going to be a bigger chunk of our lives going forward.
We need to do the things we've just been talking about. We need to focus on education. We need to focus on training. We need to focus on a culture of privacy and cybersecurity. And we need to.
You say we need to focus.
Yeah.
Who's the we?
Well,
someone's got to educate us all. Who does that?
Well, I think it has to be led by governments, and I think the governments are doing a good job, in initial stages in doing that. But I think it's, as we've talked about, I think it's an all of society approach. I think governments can lead the way, but I think the private sector and the public sector need to be involved as well. We all need to be engaged in this. It's going to take every one of us to be educated about best practices, and all of us to, adopt a cybersecurity culture that recognizes what the risks are, recognizes what the challenges are, recognizes the role we all have to play in finding solutions to this problem. So it's going to be all of us.
At McMaster, you've got thousands and thousands of students there every year, and I bet they never think about this. Are you doing anything in terms of education to get them to heads up on this?
Yes, so we do a lot at McMaster, all the way from when students are prospective students thinking to come to McMaster. When they come on board, we have training, we have modules that they can take. We also participate in the annual Cybersecurity Awareness Month of October, and we run a campaign. We hook into social media, which is where a lot of young folks spend their time, pushing out those messages and providing them with training and awareness campaigns. And we make it fun, gamify it a little bit, so that there's some contests that they can enter in, so that it sticks and becomes a part of what they do. Also, I think there's a lot of opportunities we have ahead of us to work with students in both high schools, colleges, and universities to get them involved in building education awareness campaigns. Get out there. They all have to do community service as part of what they need to do. I'm involved in a lot of women in technology kind of groups because we're looking at trying to build the next workforce of the future in cyber. And I think there's projects and initiatives we can collectively undertake. And I don't think we need to just wait for governments to come in. As cyber professionals throughout the marketplace, we need to get together and figure out things that we can do to get programs, let's say, out to seniors, get it out to the personal support workers who interact with seniors and help them make that phone call to their kids.
We're down to our last few minutes here, and I want to introduce artificial intelligence to the conversation now. How does that change the equation of what we've been talking about?
I don't think it changes it that much. It's a different technology area from IoT. It's going to enable things like IoT, but but it's going to take us forward with more and more automation, less and less worker needed. But we've been talking about the glass half empty for this whole conversation, and let's talk about the opportunity side, right? A strong economy will have cybersecurity as a foundational piece to it, whether it's AI or technology, general technologies. The opportunity, if Canada is truly going to be an AI leader, which a lot of folks want it to be, it'll require cybersecurity and trust to be foundational to the things we develop using these tools.
I guess I'd ask the same question that I just asked Tracy to you. You're at Toronto Metropolitan University, again, right in the middle of a big city, thousands and thousands of students. Are they hip to this?
Yeah, I think they're beginning to recognize the cybersecurity issues. It's obviously in the news every single day, and there are education programs at TMU, just as there are at McMaster, to make the students aware of what's happening. And just picking up on Neil's point, which I think is a really good one around the opportunity side. There's an opportunity for Canada to be at the very forefront of cybersecurity in the world in terms of economic development. It's one of the fastest growing sectors. And there are amazing companies that have grown up in Canada related to cybersecurity, and we need more of that. We have all the pieces. We've got all the skills, we've got all the people here, all the ingredients to create a really world-leading cybersecurity sector. And so that's something that's very, very exciting. So just to Neil's point about, we've been talking about the threats and the risks. Those are absolutely true, but they also create this internationally needed opportunity that Canada can really step into.
I appreciate you don't want to leave the impression that the glass is only a little half full. But I must confess, having talked to the three of you for the last half an hour, I'm more terrified now than I was before, and I bet a lot of our viewers feel the same way. Tell us why we shouldn't be terrified at the prospects here.
You should be terrified, but that's a posture, right? That if you let your guard down, right? What's different about cybersecurity and cybercrime relative to previous frauds are they're constantly evolving. Sextortion right now, we got a good chuckle of the kids, but right now one of the key themes that the FBI director talks about is kids of targets being gone after so that they can extort the parents who are prolific people. It evolves every day, every second actually of every day. Cybercrime is evolving. So if we have that posture, but then we bring both the glass half empty and glass half full perspective and say, this is not only a challenge for the world, this is an opportunity. We can start addressing that. We can start focusing our investments at the university levels, at the capital levels, at the talent levels, at all levels on the opportunity side. But you really can't start on the opportunity side when your key institutions that hold up your economy and your society, like healthcare, like banking, are underwater under this issue.
Okay, all hands on deck, as we have said. Tracy, Neil, Charles, thanks so much for joining us here on TVO tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Most of us will never see a lion or leopard or giraffe in their natural habitat, but many of us have seen them up close in a zoo. Sometimes that's in a big facility, such as the almost 300 hectares that's home to 5,000 animals here in the capital city, or it's in a roadside location with a smaller or specialty assortment of wildlife. Either way, ensuring that the animals are well cared for is a concern for all. With us now for more on that, from north of Miami, Florida, Dolph DeYoung, President and CEO of the Toronto Zoo. And here in our studio, Melissa Matlow, Campaign Director for World Animal Protection Canada, and Kendra Coulter, Professor in Management and Organizational Studies at Western University and author of Defending Animals, Finding Hope on the Front Lines of Animal Protection. Welcome to both of you in our studios, and Dolph for joining us on the line. I should mention TVO did contact many roadside zoos to take part in this conversation, but none were willing or able to appear on the program tonight. All right, with that, let's get a sense of what is happening out there when we talk about private zoos in Ontario. Melissa, I'm going to come to you first. Briefly, this is a definition here. What exactly is the difference between, say, a roadside zoo and what many people might think a petting zoo, a sanctuary, a safari, or even the Toronto Zoo, for example?
Sure. I would call a roadside zoo a grossly substandard zoo facility that keeps wild animals in a standard of their own choosing. So you typically would see a ramshackle of different cages where animals are kept in, a small, barren environment with little more than a food dish and a water dish and a shelter box to sleep in. This could be someone's collection or hobby that they had and it just went wild. And they're open to the public. These are private businesses. They're a business first, and they're open to the public, and they're allowed to open because there are very little regulations in place.
Now, is it all of them when you describe with such descriptive language?
No, there's definitely a spectrum of zoos out there, with the Toronto Zoo being, one of our top zoos in Canada, there's a variety of different places. But roadside zoos are typically those hobby zoo that is on the side of a highway, which is why they're called roadside zoos in a rural town, with people who don't have expertise or any training in how to take care of these animals, versus a more established, professionally accredited zoo, which has training and staff and a business plan, and our other guest, Dolph, will tell you more.
All right. Well, Kendra, I'm hoping you give us a sense here. Do we know how many roadside zoos are in Ontario? Do we have a figure on that?
I certainly know we have the most in the country. What's the specific number? I think it fluctuates a little bit, depending,
40, 50, something like that, I would say.
Yeah.
It's our estimate.
All right. Kendra, one of the things I had mentioned a few animals off the top, and I think when people think of roadside zoos, one of the things we think about is big cats. And I'm curious, do we know how many big cats there are in the province right now?
It's extremely hard to track. Organizations like World Animal Protection have done their best to try to establish some firm numbers. It's probably higher even than we think. It's precisely as Melissa said, this is really unregulated. It could be talking about someone having some in their backyard or on their property, and then of course we get into the private zoos. So getting a firm number is tough. What ballpark wise?
Hundreds
Yeah.
of big cats, lions, tigers, jaguars. But again, as Kendra said, there's no public reporting of this, which is a serious problem for whether it's an emergency responder or a municipal bylaw enforcement officer, not knowing what they're going to come across on someone's property.
Oh, all right. Kendra, I want to ask you, a lot of people might be surprised that there are lions, jaguars, tigers in this province right now amongst us. I'm curious, what specific animals are banned in Ontario? Are there animals that are banned?
It's interesting. In Ontario, it's actually only illegal to have two kinds of animals, pit bulls or orcas. So in contrast to a province like British Columbia, for example, which has pages of animals that have been deemed not appropriate for people to keep or private businesses to keep, because we're not able to offer anywhere near the level of even basic welfare standards for them. Ontario is a bit of a Wild West, pardon the pun,
right.
When it comes to which animals are allowed here. And most of it is left to municipalities. And some research assistants and I actually dug into the numbers across all of Ontario's 444 municipalities, and a full half of them didn't have any regulations governing the keeping of wild animals. So that's huge areas of the province. Obviously an area where we could do with some provincial leadership.
All right, we'll get into that. I want to bring Dolph into the conversation. Dolph, of course, you're at the helm of a publicly funded zoo, the Toronto Zoo. There's another component to what your organization does that I think the public may be not aware of. Talk to us a little bit about the Saving Species Sanctuary. What is it exactly?
Yeah, this is an important addition that came through our master planning process a year ago. And, as we went out to the public, we talked about our mission of connecting people, animals, and conservation science to fight extinction. One of the things they're looking for good accredited zoos to do is be a home for those animals that could be in harm's way. And kicking off the show with the number of lions, tigers, when we get into large reptiles, venomous snakes, it is really troubling that there's so many of these animals out there. We're not sure where they are, and we have such limited capacity to care for them if they are abandoned or in a scenario where that passionate person passes away or who knows what. So we added this to our master plan in response to public feedback and to address the gap that really clearly exists here of not knowing what's out there and what happens to it if they end up in harm's way.
All right, Kendra, I'm going to come to you. Recently, Melissa's organization, World Animal Protection, asked Ontarians to not visit private roadside zoos. I just want to get your take. Do you agree on that strategy?
Yes. If you want entertainment, you go see the film Blackberry. If you want to learn about animals, which I think a lot of people do, you read books, you watch documentaries. Perhaps you volunteer at your local humane society or for your local wildlife rehabilitator. Right? Roadside zoos, I think people frequent them for a range of different reasons. Sometimes I think there is that genuine curiosity and interest in animals that comes from a very laudable place, a good place. But sometimes I think most of us would agree that it's just the novelty or the entertainment factor. And the reality is that we need to move away from this idea of thinking of animals as objects to be put on display, objects that we can be making money from, or the people who run these organizations can be making money from.
All right, Melissa, let's talk Queen's Park. What is Queen's Park not doing about roadside zoos that you would like them to do?
We would like to see them set up a comprehensive, proactive licensing system so that if you want to have a zoo, you need to have the professional expertise and qualifications in order to care for those animals, that you have a business plan, an emergency plan, that you have the proper resources. Because right now, we have some standards, but it's a Band-Aid. We're seeing charges being laid and then, courts are being backlogged, so we don't even know if there's a success for a conviction. We've seen that with Marineland a few times. And there's nothing to curb this problem. We have more roadside zoos than any other jurisdiction in Canada, so it's a massive animal welfare problem and public safety problem. So we need a proactive system of licensing, and really, if those zoos can't keep their animals to a professional standard, they should be closed down in a pragmatic way.
Now, is this a little bit different than, we do have some standards. There's the Ontario Standard for Care, which is, food, shelter, water. Are we asking to double down on that, or is this something completely different?
I think the standards that exist could be strengthened. We were at the advisory table providing input in those standards. That was back, they were adopted, I think, in 2008, 2009. So it wasn't everything we asked for, but it's something. But it's also about enforcement. So we released a report last September reviewing 11 zoos in Ontario. All of those zoos had issues where there was potential violations of existing standards. So even those minimum standards are being violated. So they need to be stronger, but it needs to be backed by strong enforcement, or else it's not worth the paper it's written on.
All right, Dolph. Kendra had used the language which has been used before, the Wild West. And let's talk a little bit about sort of a patchwork job when we talk about how each municipality sort of has to come up with their own laws. How is that actually helping private zoos flourish?
Well, I think what it's allowing them to do is move to the spaces where there's not regulations in place that let them operate with their view probably minimal bureaucracy. But what that's doing is leaving animals in substandard conditions, and conditions where often organizations like ours get called in to assist, where you have animals in marginal habitats without proper food, without proper care. And really, it's an absolute tragedy. And the need to get clear on the fact that there's a minimum standard that both needs to be established and then needs to continue to evolve and improve when it comes to animals in human care, to really make sure they're living lives with purpose, and not just because somebody thinks they're great, thinks they're interesting, thinks they're a curiosity. That's not good enough anymore.
Dolph, there are a number of examples of sort of roadside zoos that have sort of maybe taken advantage of the lax laws there. Do you have any examples that you can give us? I know there's one, if you think of just off of 62, just north of Bancroft as one example, where, that has happened and the animals have actually ended up with you guys.
Yes, and we're really pleased to have the capacity, the quarantine facilities, the professional staff to be able to help in those scenarios. But really what this is about for us is reducing that happening at all, raising the standards so no animals are falling through the cracks. We were up outside of Maynooth in the past few years, and you had multiple animals in containment that really was nowhere near the level it needed to be. Animals with very little enrichment, very little space, in a highly competitive and potentially adversarial environment.
What type of animals? Sorry, Dolph.
Pardon me?
What type of animals?
lions and tigers in that case. So I think when most people hear, wait a second, that's in my backyard, everybody on this call seems like a nice person. There is no world where they should be allowed to own a lion, a tiger, a primate, a venomous reptile, a large growing reptile. We really need to put a bow on this and make sure we're removing that from the narrative, because it's not okay.
All right, Kendra, as far as solutions go, should private zoos in Ontario be obsolete, shut down?
Yes, I think we need to move in that direction while simultaneously having an action plan for the animals who are trapped in those conditions. There are examples from around the world. A number of these zoos have gone bankrupt in different jurisdictions. I know of an example, for example, in California, where something like 28 tigers were moved to a proper animal sanctuary, right? So we can have facilities where people can learn about animals in a very authentic and genuine way. And so we want to be thinking about, is that where these kinds of animals should end up, or perhaps they simply deserve peaceful retirement, completely away from public view, given the lives that they've had, right? And so if people are wanting, it's spring, summer is coming, families are thinking about ways that they want to be to getting out and enjoying our province and entertaining their family members. And I think for many families that comes from a good place. I think a lot of people, I see it with my students as well. In the past, we thought aquariums, we thought zoos were appropriate. We thought you could just pull over on the side of the road and it's okay that there are tigers in cages, that this is normal. Society is shifting. Our ethical understanding of animals is shifting. Our understanding of animals' minds, social lives, and needs are really shifting. And so people are asking these really crucial questions. And that said, the desire to want to be around animals is very powerful and authentic, and I think we want to nurture that. We want to care for animals. And so there are sanctuaries, for example, where the animals' needs are placed first. And that's the key defining feature. People can still interact. The donkey sanctuary south of Guelph, for example, is an opportunity where the public can visit a few days a month while the donkeys' needs are still held in high regard. The Ontario Turtle Conservation Centre is a wonderful facility where people can book educational tours. And we, of course, have an absolute majesty of wildlife, right? We want to think about how can we coexist with our own neighbors, whether they're skunks, raccoons, squirrels, while simultaneously getting out and enjoying the province and taking advantage respectfully of the wild animals we have around us with whom we share this province. We don't need to be importing or breeding wild animals who belong in the wild and really often belong in other countries.
All right, so see them in their natural habitat.
Absolutely.
All right, so I do want to read a quote. For their part, roadside zoos that would like to comply to an industry standard, if there was a good one, they would like to do that. So this is actually a quote from a CTV W5 report from November 2022. It reads, "What separates most roadside zoos from their better-known cousins, like the Toronto Zoo, is accreditation, adherence to industry standards set by Canada's accredited zoos and aquariums, also known as CAZA. But some roadside zoo owners, like Alicia Patton at Greenview Aviaries, do want to meet accreditation standards. That zoo was one of the 11 named in World Animal Protection's recent complaint to the Ontario government. A lot of things do need to be changed. It needs to be more structured for everybody's safety," Patton said, referring to conditions at her recently purchased zoo. Melissa, I'm going to come to you. Of course, your organization was mentioned there. What should be done to, I'll get you to comment on that too, but what should be done to help roadside zookeepers keep their business?
Well, one, I think, we shouldn't be jeopardizing animal welfare and public safety for an economic opportunity. And so I think there could be support for these zoos to, I think they should be encouraged to stop breeding and house their animals to a higher standard. That might be one pragmatic way to phase down the problem. Kendra mentioned it too, like why are people attracted to going to these places in the first place? I mean, I've been to a number of these zoos, sometimes spend half the day and observe people's habits. And kids are spending very little time in front of that cage. They're often just as excited, perhaps more excited about the ice cream stand and the splash pad. So there are opportunities that don't need to involve animals. Some of these places are outside of our provincial park system where they could go and see animals in the wild. Perhaps these zoos could benefit from that opportunity and provide something else, like a high ropes course or a corn maze or something, because often it's families that just want something to do. If it's an education thing that they're after, I know people want to foster that sense of responsibility and concern for animals and endangered species, but I question the education you get when you see an animal in an unnatural environment where it can't even behave naturally. What is a child learning about that?
I think what the children are learning, what adults are learning, is what do animals in suffering look like. Yeah. And we don't need to have the animals suffering for that to happen, right? And often people are misunderstanding what they're seeing.
Yeah.
So often they're sort of imposing these human-held ideas on animals that they're observing, right? I think there's an opportunity for us to build a comprehensive set of organizations around the province, for us to have even businesses where animals are involved, but in a more respectful way. We could have Indigenous-led tourism, for example, eco-trusts. There are opportunities for us to show reverence for the natural world without needing to keep animals in cages or picture them simply as props for social media.
All right, I'm going to play devil's advocate. Dolph, obviously the Toronto Zoo. Maybe is there a case here that maybe something like the zoo doesn't exist because a lot of these animals aren't Indigenous to Canada?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time talking about where we're at right now, captivity, because the idea of captivity until and captivity by whom, they're really important discussions to have. And the root of it actually is that people aren't paying attention. I absolutely hear you that we want people to better connect with nature, but all the data we have suggests that wildlife and wild populations, you look at the WWF Living Planet report, all those things are trending the wrong way. Biodiversity loss, climate change. We need to be taking not a passive, but incredibly active role if we're going to suggest that education's of value and we're actually delivering on it, actually measuring it as well. And we've gone through a study with our partners at the Toronto Zoo Wildlife Conservancy that actually found when it came to palm oil and electronics recycling, 2 visits, we were seeing an increase tendency for people to engage in those behaviors. There were 4 other behaviors we were looking for that actually our approach wasn't working. So actually digging into this to make sure it's effective and you're having the impact you're looking for to get to those bigger outcomes. Because, we're dreaming of a world where we deliver on those 30 by 30 goals. There's a space for wildlife to live. But when I look at the environment out there, I get very concerned that the only place we're going to see animals is in managed settings if we don't actually get our finger on what's going on in nature. The other thing I wanted to comment, because I think it's really important and I want to build on what our other panelists have said, a key tenet for us for animal welfare and well-being is choice and control. And we often will get complaints. People are like, oh, I didn't see this or that at the zoo, because those animals are offered front of house, back of house options, areas where they prefer the climate, areas where they can get away from the public. And that's one of the things they should have in most of their habitats is the ability to escape that viewing, escape that scrutiny. And one of the things that accreditation standards drive towards is those key values for the animal that gets away from that passive object that somebody sees and points and counts like it's a checklist. It has to go far further than that. And the profession needs to continue to evolve to do better, because for too long it's been a copycat profession locked in the past.
All right, Kendra, obviously Ontario is lagging in terms of many departments when we talk about roadside attractions. Is there a jurisdiction in Canada that we should be looking at and following some sort of model?
Well, BC has set an ambitious legislative agenda, but we might actually need to look globally. And I'm going to answer that in 2 ways.
Yes.
And in part, it's out of Belgium in particular, there are what we call the positive lists that have been developed, which is the idea that animal species should not be in human hands unless we can meet a high set of standards. And so you begin with none and then start building which animals can be coexist with humans or can be kept by humans in ways that meet their physical, psychological, and social needs. So there are real opportunities for us to shift our paradigm. And simultaneously, when we're talking about many of the wild animals who are in zoos today, these are extraordinary animals from other countries. And this model doesn't seem to be working, precisely as Dolph has said, that we're seeing conservation in many parts of the world decline or endangered species numbers increase. It's very dire. In the places where it's successful, it's community-led. And it's conservation leaders in those countries. They're teenagers, they're young people, sometimes they're seniors. It's multi-generational, where they're developing economic alternatives to support, because these animals often coexist with people in some of the poorest countries in the world and poorest communities in the world, where it's seen as about science, yes, but simultaneously about job growth, about creating humane opportunities for people and communities to thrive. And so for us, in a wealthy province like Ontario, in a wealthy country like Canada, perhaps instead of giving our money to a private zoo, we should be supporting with donations the folks on the front lines of conservation around the world, and so that we can together be securing the future of wild animals where they belong, in the wild.
All right, Melissa, we talked about...
Can I comment on that?
Yes, yep.
I agree wholeheartedly. And one of our key approaches with our capital programs now is when we're investing on physical infrastructure here, we're also investing across the world and really looking at getting away from that colonial conservation mindset we saw in the past and investing in frontline workers in these countries. So whether it's an individual monitoring lemurs in Madagascar or working in a park protecting orangutans in Sumatra, making long-term multi-year commitments. And again, our Wildlife Conservancy has been huge with that, to be able to make 10-year commitments so we have continuity, so people can look after their families and deliver on protecting these animals for future generations. And it's a big, nasty ball we're trying to unpack and untangle. But for the price of a plane ticket, in some cases, you can employ somebody for a year. So being far more pragmatic and quite frankly, aggressive in our approach to say, we're going to remove some of those safeties, make sure that money is flowing to frontline places where those species are at risk, and using the zoo as a mechanism to do that, I think is a key part of the model we'd like to see adopted everywhere.
All right, we're going to come back to Ontario now. Melissa, we've talked about the well-being and safety, of course, of animals. To what extent are children, the public, even zookeepers, and I'll even add bylaw officers who sometimes have to respond to this, at risk when it comes to our patchwork of regulations?
It's a massive risk. I mean, where do I start? There have been people who have been killed because of an animal in a private collection.
Zookeepers, you're talking.
Zoo owner, zookeeper, would you call him? I don't know. It's a private tiger collector. And that is an example that dates back to 2010. This was actually the spokesperson for the Roadside Zoo Association that was mauled by his own tiger. The municipality passed a bylaw to restrict him, and he fought it and won. And so he was a victim of his own success. And this is why we need the province to upload this problem. He passed away, and I mean, there have been kids who have been scratched. There have been, these mobile zoos are a big concern as well. They're coming into daycares and schools and senior homes, the people who are most vulnerable to disease risks. You know, there was one story of a tarantula, and a microscopic barb got into a kid's eye. When that kid was brought into the hospital, the doctors didn't know what it was. Of course they wouldn't know what it was, right? Like there's so many different species that are allowed to be kept. It's not reasonable to expect our doctors, our emergency workers, our bylaw enforcement officers to know not only about the welfare needs of those animals, but also the safety risks they pose to them and the community.
All right. Kendra, it seemed early pandemic, it was sort of mandatory viewing to watch Tiger King. Obviously a series, for people who don't know, about a big cat owner in the U.S. That is big business in the U.S. To what extent is it like here in Ontario?
Yeah, and we can call it legalized animal cruelty. I think you know, everything that folks saw in that show is widely the norm. This is an absolute patchwork. Any kind of animal captivity exists across the spectrum. You have higher standards, and then you have absolutely you know, no regard, that where the bottom line is being placed at the top priority. And you know, this lousy meat, dangerous for people. You know, it was sort of a sensational experience, but the reality is absolutely miserable for animals on the ground.
All right, Dolph, I want to come to you. You know, many Ontarians don't live near your zoo. And if we can properly regulate roadside zoos, why should the public not have the opportunity to see wild animals in their own municipality instead of traveling to Toronto?
You know what? This isn't about those individuals as far as the people. It's about the animals, and we have to keep them front and center in this. And it's an incredible privilege to get to be close to these animals, to get to work with them, and a huge responsibility, a sacred duty to care for them. So I do apologize to them, and we do look to reach out to them with digital channels and other pieces. But I don't think we're aspiring for a world where you have this patchwork quilt of animals scattered across the province in substandard conditions. What we're looking for is a broader understanding of what good looks like, what progressive care looks like, and whether it's a positive list or a negative list, getting really clear on what it means to have animal species A or B near you. And our standards with the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, I think, are just a key benchmark, a starting point to set that in place. And if you can't meet that standard, we need to ask the next questions of whether or not you should have that animal in your care at all.
Melissa, as Dolph had mentioned, as we've I've gotten from all three, is animals come first. I do need to ask, what is it about these creatures that captivate us?
Oh, wow, where do you start? I mean, they're amazing. And what we've seen in our research is that it's often self-described animal lovers that are attracted to doing some of these harmful things, like the people who want to swim with a captive dolphin or ride an elephant or hold an animal for a photo op. They just don't understand how their desire to get up close to that animal is causing that animal that harm. So this is a big education opportunity, and it's miseducation when we allow this, because it's the exact opposite of what our conservation officers are teaching people when they approach an animal in the wild, right? It's to keep your distance, to not interfere, to not feed them. So if we really want to solve the biodiversity crisis and instill that respect for animals, we need to put a curb on our desire to get close because we're excited by them and give them respect. The best place to see a wild animal is in the wild from a respectful distance.
Well, that you ask most kids about dinosaurs, and they can talk to you for an hour or more, and they've never seen a dinosaur live. Right? We want to be challenging that idea. Precisely as you say, it's coming from a place of love and care.
Yep.
Let's, in our own relationships, in our communities, on opportunities like this, talk about what does it really mean to care for animals. And sometimes that means precisely us stepping back, us allowing them to live the lives that they need to be living in the wild.
All right, we are going to leave it there.
Right.
Thank you so much, Kendra, Melissa, and Dolph. Really appreciate it.
Tomorrow on the agenda.
Young people, I think, today rightly feel pretty peeved about the democratic system and the extent to which it's served them. And I do worry that increasingly young people are turning to more anti-democratic means in order to get their voice heard.
That's tomorrow on the agenda.